Alright guys, so here are 3 things I did when running projects at Google, at Meta, whatever company you're at. You'll need to do these 3 things in order to get projects completed and done. It's very important you do this because if you don't do it, you're not getting projects done, you won't get good reviews, and you won't complete your projects. So the first thing I did is I worked with a bevy of stakeholders within Google, Meta. And essentially that was working with engineering, it was working with project managers, business analysts, directors, other teams all throughout the company. So the main thing I did is whenever I needed something from someone, I always tried to establish rapport and a relationship, right? Because essentially you're working with people. And when you work with people, people want to help people that they like and they care about, right? When I was doing my first internship in undergrad, I worked with doctors and they gave me a story about how they really admired my kindness and my ability to work with people, because you can be at the emergency room at Stanford. These are Stanford doctors I work with, and you'll have angry patients. They'll get what they want, they'll be rude, they'll be mean, and they'll get what they want. But the kind people who are very kind to doctors, they're more inclined to help them. So that's kind of what I learned at my first internship. So when I went to Google, more or less, I learned that, okay, I should use kindness, develop a rapport and a relationship with that person or that stakeholder or whoever I'm working with. So whenever I had to work with an engineer or with another project manager or another person or lawyer in different teams, I always tried to develop relationships. The way I did this was first, I kind of complimented them, right? I said, I like what you're wearing today, or I'd say, I like your presence at the previous meeting. Or I talk about basically oh, that was a great picture of your family that you showed me. So I just find something to compliment them about. And by doing this, it kind of establish a rapport in a relationship where they're like, okay, Angel's a good guy. He really cares of me as a person. And I don't need to jump into business right now because I actually enjoy being around him. So that was one thing I did, right? I always tried to develop a relationship with the person I was trying to work with, right? So whenever you start a meeting, whenever you need to work with a stakeholder, try developing a relationship with them, whether it be complimenting them what they're wearing, complimenting them on a project they completed, or talking about their family in a kind way, where you're just kind of developing that rapport relationship. Another big thing I like to talk about, I learned at Stanford, was that sports is a great mediator. So if you're into sports, a lot of people are into sports, whether it be football, basketball, hockey, soccer, whatever it may be, just brush up on that, learn about sports and talk about the local teams. That's always a great conversation starter. So it makes you seem less like a robot and more like a person, a human being. So do that. Work on your conversation skills through developing rapport and a relationship. Next thing I did whenever I had a project was a lot of documentation is required when you work at Facebook, when you work at Google, whenever you work at a big company. So creating documentation is required. So I've learned throughout my experiences that it's much easier to create the documentation and have people comment on it, right? So at Google, you're developing tons of procedures and processes in order to help the business become profitable or develop different aspects of the business. So when you create documentation and you need SMEs or subject matter experts or stakeholders to approve it, your best bet is to create the documentation itself and then add those SMEs or subject matter experts to the document and have them comment on the document on where you think that they would be best suited. So if you have an engineer who's focusing on the hardware part of a data center and you need their expertise, have them comment on that, right? Say, hey, XYZ engineer, I need this. Can you please add comments or thoughts on this documentation? By doing this, it's a lot better because you're not forcing that stakeholder to create a brand new documentation out of thin air. You're actually giving them stuff to work with. And by giving them stuff to work with, they're able to just kind of create that documentation, add stuff where they think is necessary, or remove stuff that they don't think is necessary, right? So always create documentation or material before a meeting, or if ever you need an input on a stakeholder, so that way they can just edit and add, right? You never want them to have to create something out of scratch, because people are so busy, especially in corporate America, especially in tech, that they would not want to just basically have to create something from scratch. So always create documentation and have them comment on it, all right? Third and final tip I have for y'all is that you need to establish and set deadlines. What does that mean? So like those documentations that you need commenting from a stakeholder or an email that you may need from someone, you you want to establish a deadline. So whenever I sent an email that I knew was urgent, because people get hundreds of emails every day. At Google, I was getting like 100 emails every day, and I was just so overwhelmed, right? So you can only imagine if they're like a director or manager, they're probably getting CC'd on their employees' emails, they're probably getting a ton of emails too, so just a lot of stuff. So your best bet is to set and establish deadlines. So if you have a certain project that needs an SME's or subject matter expert's opinion on something, you want to make sure you give them a deadline. If it's extremely urgent, I like to just kind of make sure that they know what I need it by. Most deadlines, I'll give it about 7 days. If it's something urgent, I need it within the next 28 to 48 hours. I'll say, please respond by end of day. Please respond by tomorrow. Please respond next 72 hours. This is very urgent. And then once you set that deadline, if it's super urgent, you want to send a ping to them, right? I wish I knew that. During my time at Google, when I'm at Google, I'm always trying to be like super googly or too kind, right? Where I'm just like not trying to step on anyone's toes, but by being too kind and being too kind of like afraid of conflict, you in a sense mess yourself up because you're not pushing your project through. That looks bad on your manager because they can see that you're not assertive enough on your projects. Yes, be kind. Yes, be nice. Be very firm on your deadlines. And I have one last final tip for y'all. It's a bonus tip. I learned this during business school and during my case studies, is that the person who sets the meeting should allow people to basically kind of talk about things, debate about things, but the person who has this meeting agenda set, they need to be the one to have the final call and everything, right? So during basic business case studies, a lot of the most successful companies, they learn that when the person setting the meeting has the final call, they're able to kind of push and have more action, right? So whenever you set a meeting with your stakeholders, with your manager, or whomever it may be, where you have a lot of stakeholders and people in the meeting, and people have so many opinions, gather the information from everyone, and then at the end of the meeting, you need to be the one to create the final action or the final call. So make sure you're the one in charge at the end, right? Whatever action items will be coming out for the meeting, whatever deadlines will be coming for the meeting, you need to be the one to do that. So those are my 3 tips. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment, subscribe. I will be posting more videos like this. I believe in y'all. You can do this. Appreciate you guys, Jello family.